Welcome to my channel. This is the Diamond Chrysalis, aka Divested Diamonds. This is Divestment with Purpose, and you have arrived. Greetings and salutations, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for being here today. Please do me a favor and click the like button as you watch this video. Thank you kindly. As you can see from the title, it's all self-explanatory. In today's premiere, we're going to talk about divestment, who we are, and why the so-called community hates us so much. So before we dive into this topic, it's very important to get an understanding of what divestment is. What is divestment as it pertains to Black women in relation to the so-called community, the Black community? Now, as an original content creator of divestment and one of the first few creators of this movement online, I have my own definition of what it means, which I've given in many past videos. Today, however, I would like to take a look at Google because I came across some very interesting definitions. Now, let's take a look to see if it's congruent with the original definition. There's an article here from 2 years ago which says, Black women's divestment, Divestors, or Black Woman Divest, is a growing online movement focused on the mental liberation of Black women from destructive cultures brought forth by the Black community. Okay, this is good. This is definitely very good. One thing I do like about this explanation is that there is no mention of men, white or otherwise, because for those who don't like divestors, their main talking points every time they attempt to criticize or diminish what it means to be a divestor are always aligned with Black women allegedly fleeing the so-called community in droves to be with white men specifically. And that's not what this movement was all about. As I've mentioned in previous videos, the divestment movement, as we know it in this space, was put together by a group of Black women whose dating and marriage preferences were with men outside of our race. It had nothing to do with fetishism or the glorification of white men in particular. Divestment focuses on individual values and goals. The most important person in this entire process is you, the divestor. It has nothing to do with Brad, Chad, Ezra, or Ryan, etc. Here's a little history of how this came about. So, we've always known how problematic the so-called community has always been towards Black women and girls, right? Upon realizing how much trouble Black women and girls were in, we decided collectively as content creators to spread the word on the atrocities of the so-called community towards women and girls. We used our own individual platforms to put out videos highlighting the many ways in which Black women and girls have suffered, all at the hands of Black males. We talked about the merciless and senseless deletions of Black women and girls, all at the hands of Black males. We highlighted just how toxic the so-called community truly was. The aim here was to bring awareness to our issues that were constantly being ignored by the community as well as the media. Once again, The aim was for Black women to save themselves from the constant community abuse. It was for Black women to recognize just how they were always being used as mules for the benefit of everyone else while leaving them in a mental and emotional health deficit. Now, it's also important to note that when this quote-unquote movement started, it was never about hating or bashing Black men. Matter of fact, Black men were already online bashing Black women. They were and still are in 2025 telling the world how much they hate Black women. And I had to mention that because there's this false narrative that's always being spun about how divestors are a hate group. We're not, and never were. If hate is what you get from the things we say, that's only because karma finally found you, and you probably deserve everything you get. Pointing out the deplorable behavior of a group of people, a group of males who terrorize and delete girls and women who look like them, isn't hate. That's a problem in itself. Sadly, the quote-unquote community has always relied on the silence of Black girls and women to fulfill their degeneracy. And because the quote-unquote I Love Black Men channels refuse to address this nonsense, anything divestors say is considered hate speech. Divestors have been maligned and accused of being extreme. Extreme as opposed to what? Being shamed into lowering your standards in a bid to accept low-hanging fruit for partners? Or could it be the community's indoctrination of Black women and girls through coercion by forcing them to be kind and forgiving of men who may later execute them due to a lack of emotional regulation? It's easy for aggressors to play the victim when no one sees what goes on behind closed doors, when no one sees what happens in secret. Every action has a reaction, and Black women are simply responding to what you have been doing to them over time. And honestly, sometimes the truth sounds extreme when presented in its purest form. There's a huge majority of you who've made countless videos of Black women who are really swirlers and labeled them divested once their interracial relationships have gone south. Part of that is due to the fact that the majority of you do not want to see Black women happy. And the other part is that most of you do not know what true divestment is or what it looks like. So any chance you have of deterring Black women from putting themselves first is an absolute pleasure for you. Misery loves company. The other part is due to the fact that you would rather Black women stay in the so-called community to continue muling for the masses. Everybody knows that the so-called community only cares about Black men and boys and not Black women and girls. So when Black women turn their backs on the unfairness, the mistreatment, and danger that they're subjected to, it's still not good enough for you, because Black women aren't allowed to flourish and be happy. Oftentimes, they are ridiculed and made to feel guilty for choosing themselves. And that's just simply unacceptable. Black girls and women are expected to hold the fort for a community that cares nothing about them and their safety. And that's supposed to be normal? The concept of divestment could be huge. A huge lifesaver for a lot of Black women if the majority of them didn't fight against it. Every day, there are stories of Black women who got into a relationship with a king only to be used, abused, and deleted. None of these quote-unquote I Love Black Men channels would ever cover those stories, because that would make the Kangs, the black males, look bad. And here's another quote-unquote extreme point that you all might not like. The concept of building and maintaining the black family will never come to fruition on a mass scale, because black men and women aren't compatible. We never were. Our needs, wants, and expectations have never aligned. Now, are there individual circumstances where things have seemingly worked out? Sure. I just wonder what some of those women had to secretly endure to make that happen. The only time the quote-unquote black family has ever come together, historically speaking, is when black males are being undermined and disrespected by the dominant society. Only then did black males temporarily feel a bond with black women. But if we're being brutally honest here, that quote-unquote bond would never have been present had black males been accepted and given a seat at the table by the dominant society. It's always amazing what people are willing to do when forced to trauma bond with people they don't like. Black men have never been great companions for black women, generally speaking, because every time they've had the upper hand or given the opportunity to improve themselves, it's been without black women. So most black women have been beating a dead horse this entire time. With that said, I don't understand the anger when it comes to divestors doing what's best for them and saying, you know what? Being a part of a community that doesn't encourage me to grow, a community that doesn't support me and my endeavors, isn't good for my mental health. Therefore, I will abandon this environment and its people and live my life elsewhere, in a place where I can work on my mental health and be true to who I really am as an individual. Because there is no such thing as individuality in the so-called community. Everything is groupthink. You're ridiculed for being different, bullied even. There's no diversity when it comes to embracing different types of personalities. You can't be an introvert. You can't be nerdy. You can't be too educated. We know that. You can't speak in a certain way, otherwise they'll call you weird or accuse you of trying to be someone of a different race. There is no support system when it comes to black women and girls. The reason the entire community is a matriarchy is because the males have always relied on the women to make things happen. So when they sit online and call black women masculine, they are simultaneously highlighting their own effeminate behavior. When a community of women have been abandoned and are left to do all the work, the heavy lifting, taking care of everything by themselves, they will operate in a state of masculinity or masculine energy. Femininity can only be showcased in situations where masculinity operates at a higher frequency for the benefit of all involved, which means men taking over and operating in their nature with pride, and not because they're being forced to do so. The reason the so-called community operates in a matriarchy is because the males have failed to embrace their masculine nature. Most of them are born into single-parent households, mostly raised by women. They have no example of positive male leadership because a lot of them start off life with a trauma of abandonment. Male abandonment and not female abandonment. And rather than be angry at the parent who left, they would rather be at odds with the parent who stayed. This doesn't make sense until you realize that most men will quite comfortably support each other's degeneracy because they do have an unspoken code of unity. They can relate to each other on a level no woman can. This is why they hate single mothers. Even though the worst of the two parents shouldn't be upheld to a higher standard, he still is, because men are loyal to other men and not women. There's a reason most Black men don't have an issue with the low rates of marriage within the so-called community. They don't care. The entire responsibility has been left up to Black women to sort out. 31.2% is the current marriage rate in the so-called community. If marriage is what you want, it's literally a roll of the dice. Why would any Black woman put up with all these issues when, as a woman, options and opportunities await you? And you see, part of the problem when it comes to this issue is that most Black women lack the confidence to be able to venture out and see what else is out there beyond the confines of the so-called community. It also doesn't help that we do live in segregated communities, which means some Black women find it uncomfortable to even interact with people of different races. This is partly what drives most of them to stay put and tolerate what they're used to. Doing this actually works out in the quote-unquote community's favor because they benefit from knowing that the majority of you are going nowhere and the males can do as they please because they are guaranteed a relationship regardless of behavior. How many times have we seen highly accomplished Black women with losers that they'd hoped would make something of themselves? I'll wait. The reason some Black women have divested from the so-called community is because of the many aforementioned examples. And here's the thing. It's not because they are unable to find a quote-unquote good Black man, even though that in itself is ridiculous. Divestment was never about Black women not being able to find intimate relationships with Black men. This entire thing stems from the negative effects that the so-called community has had on Black women and girls. It's about the bad relationship cycles that the so-called community is willing to hold on to in order to keep quote-unquote Blackness together. It's about breaking generational habits or curses that are of no value to Black women and girls specifically. The community need not worry about Black women leaving and shunning them in droves. That's never going to happen. You still have plenty of women who are willing to do all that they can to keep hope alive, to keep this toxic machine running. You still have plenty of women who are willing to have out-of-wedlock children for men whose DNA should never, ever be replicated. Divestors only make up a small percentage of Black women. We're a small community, but yet everyone seems interested in what we're doing. And it's not because they care. It's not because they want to add some kind of positivity to what we're doing. They use divestment for clicks and views. They use divestment for clout. And they use divestors for comic relief. These people really think it's funny. They are so miserable that it gives them something to talk about. All they want to do is shame us for not being strong enough to put up with the community abuse. And they seem to have this roundabout way of doing it. They would rather attack you and who you date or marry. They look for inconsistencies in your interracial relationships and use that to bully you. The fact of the matter is, not all Black women will divest. We already know that because that requires self-reflection, accountability, introspection, etc., which most Black women do not have or aren't willing to access. Sadly, a lot of Black women are too Black male identified to care. Look, I know how shocking it is for someone to say, you know what? This community isn't for me, even though the people in the community itself look like you. I know it's shocking to say, this is too toxic, I'm done. Rule number 1 of divestment is recognizing the biggest threat to your mental health and doing everything in your power to not only eliminate the threat, but get yourself to safety. Sometimes this comes in the form of restructuring your entire existence. Divestment is only easy for those who are mentally and emotionally prepared to take the journey. It's a small price to pay if self-love and self-preservation are at the center of everything you do. And finally, swirlers and divestors are not the same people. Swirling simply means dating outside of your race and not just exclusively people your own kind. So yeah, swirlers date across the board, including their own race. Look, Crystalline Karazin already told swirlers to get the best man for the job. And for swirlers, the best man could be a Black man or a man of another race. But because a lot of you are lazy and can't breathe without sensationalism, you couldn't be bothered to tell the difference because lies and drama are really what you live for. And this is why you tend to use swirling and divestment interchangeably, spreading misinformation. But what do you care? You love it. Let me tell you a little story. About 6 to 8 years ago, when divestment started picking up steam and was being talked about in the BWE sector of YouTube, there was a crossover between swirlers and divestors, or the women known as divestors today, who were Black women who exclusively dated out. Believe it or not, swirlers and divestors actually got along. There were some swirlers at the time who felt you could actually have a divested mindset while still in relationships with Black men, or while pursuing relationships with Black men. This sentiment, however, was shared by mostly women who came from the swirling camp. As time went on and the group started to separate, some of the swirlers brought that mindset to the divested side. Eventually, changes had to be made in order to make it clear that fence sitters would no longer be accepted. The ones who leaned more towards the swirling side were seen as fence sitters, and that was addressed in quite a few videos. And I do remember Isadora Storm, or Izzy's World, doing a video about that. Divestment has evolved, and there are certain things that just aren't allowed in today's divestment, or even back then. That was part of the reason we separated. So it's quite shallow, but not surprising to see non-divestors turn the entire movement into the simple act of dating out. So back to my point, swirlers and divestors are not the same. There's more to being divested than just dating out. The dating out part is something that you do further down the line, and that's after you've done all the work on yourself. Interracial dating within divestment is not a priority. It's not a necessity when it comes to divestment itself. Divestment is a mindset which turns into a lifestyle. It's about putting yourself first and leaving all toxicity behind. And when we say all, we mean all. It doesn't matter if it's your family, your friends, anyone can get it. That's what divestment is all about. It's about walking away from situations that no longer serve you. It's about self-preservation, self-love, self-reflection, introspection, and holding yourself accountable for your life's decisions. Obviously, divestment is a lot more than the things I've mentioned. But let me make something clear. You don't have to be in a relationship with a man of a different race to qualify as a divestor. But you do need to do the internal work to even be considered divested. Literally, anyone can be a swirler, but not everyone is capable of divestment. Operative word, being capable. Divestment is a journey of self. No one else can do the work for you. This is a journey you have to embark on by yourself. You know, I've always found it fascinating when people confidently talk about something without doing any bit of research. And the funny thing is, you have clowns in the comment section talking about, oh yeah, you're right. Divestors this and divestors that. Yeah, tell them about themselves. Yeah, tell it, sister. Tell it, sister. Ooh, tell it, brother. But it's all lies. Is this what you thrive on? Sometimes I just listen and laugh, thinking to myself, wow, what a bunch of idiots. You all sound stupid, and I barely call people stupid. But if the shoe fits, you know what to do with it. Need a red nose? Stupid. Oh, but anyway, let's continue. And here's the thing, ladies. At the end of the day, we know who we are, and that's all that matters. What these people think doesn't really count. Again, not all Black women who interracially date are divestors. You can date or marry out and not be divested at all. Those individuals are called swirlers. Divestors, contrary to popular belief, come in many different forms. You have single, married, single and child-free, married with children, married without children, etc. With that said, there's no relationship required if you choose not to have one. You don't solidify your divestment by dating out, even though that can be a part of it. The only thing that's required is that you continue to work on yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, and freeing yourself from the shackles of the so-called community, freeing yourself from anything that no longer serves you. That's the whole point of divestment. Learn to love who you are and protect your mental health. You see, in a lot of ways, divestment, as it pertains to business, is very similar to the personal divestment of Black women. In business, divestment involves a company selling a portion of its assets, often to improve company value and obtain higher efficiency. Similarly, the divestment of Black women involves shedding the dead weight, the programming, the toxic ideas thrust upon us by the so-called community in order to live a fruitful and productive life. So this begs the question, what's wrong with that? Once again, divestment is a journey of self. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Lastly, I would like for you to listen to the following in order to understand the extent of some of the lies and assumptions that have been made about divestors by those who know nothing, and I mean nothing, about divestment. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Pretty Girl Club. This is going to be a psychoanalysis series of divestors, And the reason that I'm doing this is because I caught people talking shit about Exoticals over in the Divestment Reddit. And so now we're going to be doing a full-blown psychoanalysis of Divestors because I'm feeling pretty diabolical. That's right. Welcome to the Diabolicals United community. And one thing that I have already noticed is, have you ever realized that whenever Divestors do their talking points about, marriage and stuff like that, they never give any good examples of successful divested marriages? So, for example, I saw on Chrissy's channel that she did a stream praising Jodie Turner-Smith, using Jodie Turner-Smith as a representation of a successful woman who, married interracially. And we all know how that turned out. He was a serial cheater. And actually, even after Jodie Turner-Smith divorced her husband, then Lupita Nyong'o went and picked up Jodie Turner-Smith's leftovers, and she actually began dating that man. So have you ever noticed that whenever you ask divestors, like, hey, can you name some examples of like successful marriages, or like what type of marriage are you going for? I've noticed they can never name any examples. But you know what I also did notice though? It seems like the divestment movement is a bunch of women who aspire to be like Nara Smith. So that would actually explain some of the hatred against Nara Smith and some of the jealousy against her, because I do think that there is a possibility that some of Nara Smith's haters could have been women who deep down inside want Nara Smith's exact lifestyle. And maybe they're aspiring to have that life where you're married to a rich, handsome white man, and then you get to just be on TikTok in your evening gowns and kind of be the stay-at-home mom. But I've noticed that a lot of divestors, whenever they name examples of successful interracial marriages, they rarely have any examples, or if they do, they will name someone who's actually mixed race or biracial, like Jasmine Tooks. They might name like Tamara Mori. So once again, these women are actually mixed race. So that also goes against this talking point that they try to use, that supposedly non-black men don't like mixed race women. And also there are some people who say mixed race women are non-black. So how would a non-black man not like non-black women? And I mean, I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I just feel like there are so many holes in these talking points. I've noticed another example that they tend to use is Serena Williams with her husband, but Serena Williams is in a hypogamous marriage. Serena Williams' net worth is around $290 million, whereas Alexis Ohanian's net worth is around $70 million. So she is making about triple. She's actually making more than triple what he's making, or like her net worth is more than his. But I've seen divestors use Serena Williams' marriage as some sort of like example for like what you should do.
In case you're wondering who that is, she calls herself Exoticals United. So, to answer your question, Ms. Exoticals United, divestors aspire to be themselves, to be better versions of themselves. It's not quite as complicated as you all like to think it is. You see, a lot of you have turned divestment into some kind of sex club, like a sex cult, for supposedly desperate Black women whose only focus in life is to chase after white men and have mixed babies.
Divestors, they're actually going to build this community. They're really just going to birth a whole bunch of mixed race children who are going to come across this content when they get older, or they're going to come across other mixed race content creators, whether they're a part of the exotical space or not. They will be able to relate more to other people who probably share their phenotype and their experience. So for that reason, I will never be against swirling.
Once again, even when it's as simple as dating out, you all cannot fathom that Black women just want to be loved and respected like everyone else. First of all, you are unequivocally very wrong with your assertions when it comes to divestment. Allow me to digress for a moment so I could express a few things before I forget. And don't worry, your points will be addressed momentarily. Now, if you know anything at all about how the so-called community works, you will understand why Black women and girls deserve better than the scraps they're given. Divestment is necessary because it saves lives. And that's the part that you all do not want to talk about. It's not a talking point. It's not a joke. And it's certainly not just a hashtag. Let me recommend something to you. please check out the following channel. It's called Unfiltered Stories. While the channel highlights the problematic ways of men towards women and children of all races, Black women and girls are overly represented when it comes to SA crimes in the so-called community. What you see on that channel is just a glimpse into the unspoken and underreported truth for the majority of Black girls and women. Most times, a lot of these individuals are either too afraid or too ashamed to even tell the truth. It's not a secret that when a lot of these girls and women try to expose what happened to them, they aren't believed in most cases. Shocker! Their trauma is dismissed and they're basically told to move on. There are bad apples in every community, some more than others. What the so-called community has done very well is show Black women and girls time and time again just how much they aren't valued. They abuse girls whom they forget will one day grow up to be women. And if those traumas aren't addressed, and they usually aren't because nobody truly cares when it comes to Black girls. And so when these girls grow up to be women, and once they go out into the world and act inappropriately, the same community is the first to ask, "Who hurt you?" A gaslighting question that creates more unnecessary triggers. And they do so not because they care. They do it as a shaming tactic to mock you and further punch down on the very group they hate the most. This is done to put Black women in their place, to shut them up into the nothingness that they think we are. Now, let's circle back to you, Ms. Exotical. Divestment has nothing to do with wanting to emulate people such as Nara Smith. You know, that is so random to me because in the grand scheme of things, who the heck is Nara Smith when we speak of the betterment of Black women and divestment? Who is this woman if not some rando on the internet doing content about a life that she potentially doesn't even live? And throwing the term jealousy around like bird food is nothing short of cantankerous. A lot of you are too high up your pedestal. You truly believe that Black women are jealous of everything you've got. And I think that's comical. For me personally, I prefer to focus my time on issues that have some kind of depth and not surface level nonsense with no substance. And here's the thing. I haven't seen any videos or heard anyone within divestment pedestalizing Nara Smith. First of all, on account of race, Nara Smith is not relatable to Black women. I do understand she's biracial, but she's still not relatable to Black women. She's married to someone who's half of who she is. Why would Black women be worried about that? Why would any Black woman care about that? Why would divestors even think about her at all? Why? And just a little side note, not all Black women. Ooh, no. Let's go back. Let's go back and use your own words. Not all unambiguous Black women are obsessed with being mixed, wanting to be mixed, or the nature of mixed women. Where do you all get this crap? No one, and I mean no one within divestment cares about that crap. Nobody. And riddle me this. Why are some of you so hung up on irrelevant, shallow conversations and issues? Why? Is this really the best you can do? Because, listen, some of these things that you deem important are not that to divestors. So, methinks someone is creating drama just for the algorithm. But I digress. Secondly, her lifestyle as a quote-unquote trad wife is far from what a real trad wife life looks like. I should know. I used to be one. Stop being fooled by the internet. That woman is not at home all day by herself, taking care of the household while her husband is at work, providing for his family. Are people really this gullible? She actually puts in a lot of work, posting onto social media for pay. She's not working for free, which, if you ask me, or any real trad wife will tell you that that aspect alone disqualifies her from being a traditional wife. What are we talking about? Real divestors do not care what's going on in Nara Smith's life because she isn't relevant to us as individuals or any part of our divestment journeys. As far as the interracial couples you talked about, girl, that's a reach. That's a real stretch. And look, I get it. I understand that sensationalism brings views to the channels, but damn, we don't need to make stuff up just for content. It's highly distasteful. But hey, who says that morals are for everyone? Gotta feed that hungry algorithm monster, right? Anyway, all the interracial couples you mentioned are definitely swirlers. Now that we can all agree on. The only reason you'd call them divestors is because their relationships failed. And you all love to find comedy in that aspect of things. So sad. Very sad. So anyway, a real divestor would be someone like the late great, the legendary Tina Turner. Oh, do we have the right to claim her, or is she too exotical for us? Just asking, because apparently we claim everyone. We're so desperate for inclusion that we just claim everyone. Just checking. But anyway, that aside, everything about how she conducted herself and how she lived her life after escaping her gang. You know, the one who put hands and feet on her, that one, Ike Turner. As I was saying, everything about how she lived her life points to her being very divested. And here's the thing. The reason real divestors, operative word being real, right? The reason real divestors aren't so quick to slap that label on just anyone who dates out is because truly divested women, truly divested Black women are very few and far between. You see, spreading one's cheeks and bouncing on the Twinkies of other race men is not a prerequisite for divestment. I hope this helps. Please spread the word. On that note, what are your thoughts on what's been discussed here today? Please leave your thoughts and comments down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And remember, ladies, the only thing that matters at the end of the day is that we know who we are. Let the naysayers talk themselves to sleep. They love the sounds of their own voices anyway, so why not? Divest, divest, divest. Divest from Blackistan. Divest from those who mean you harm. This is the Diamond Chrysalis. You've been watching Divestment with Purpose. Divest like a butterfly, and I'll see you next time. Bye, diamonds.